shoulder pads, and so it's really early, but everybody's out there and going. We had Pat Macon had a foot injury that might be longer than what we would want. Could be a couple, 3 months. We'll know more later, but he won't be out there for a while. Other than that, everybody's up and running and should be doing good.
Ready for another question?
Coach, how helpful will it be for whichever quarterback takes over to have such accomplished receivers? You lost a couple, but yet you still have McCleskey, Stoner, and Johnson, some other talented guys. How helpful will that be for whoever steps in?
Yeah, the guys at that position, the quarterback position, are fortunate that we have maturity. We lost some really good receivers, but we've got a number of guys that have a lot of experience and should be good players. And then, of course, they're running backs. And I think as we get into the 1st of October, we should be better in the offensive line than we have been in a number of years, just from experience and guys understanding our schemes and concepts. And that should help us bring one of those guys along.
Mike, we heard a lot from Jim Mills this week about sort of the style of his meetings and the music and everything he does to try to get 18 to 22-year-olds interested. What have you learned from kind of peeking in and watching how he runs those things?
What in the world are you holding? That is like a Lego popsicle stick. That is awesome. Oh, my 13-year-old doesn't see that. I went to a couple of his meetings, Mark, in the spring, and very interesting. I really don't know how to explain it. I guess very technology savvy. He relates to the young people and different things, pop-ups and all the stuff like they get on their phones. His meetings are generated that way. Guys probably should go to one at some point and you'll get a better idea. I won't do a good enough job of illustrating it, but it's much different than I have ever been around before.
Mike, your 07 roster, you had 3 NFL backs on your roster that you rotated. Now, Hubbard looked good in the spring. Do you think there's a chance that in regard to being at least 3 deep with guys you can really trust on Saturdays, this might be the best collection of running backs you've had maybe since that group?
I would say, as we see it now, yes. We have really 2 guys that are proven with Hill and with JD from, he touched the ball on the road in conference play last year 48 times in one game. I think that was the number, maybe 38, 48, it's all the same. So he's kind of a proven player for us. And then LD's done well, and we really like Chuba. So as a group, they should be very effective. And I'm hoping that we can keep them fresh and healthy. And as it stands now, I can't imagine that we couldn't do that.
Hey, Mike, your top 4 receivers are likely to be McCleskey, Stoner, Johnson, and Wallace, Tylan Wallace. We obviously know the first 3 fairly well, have a pretty good body of work on them, but Tylan's still sort of making his presence known. What do you see as his greatest strengths and what he can bring? And was he somewhat a victim of the fact that you had James Washington, Marcel Aitman? Could he have been more of a guy last year even?
The guys that were at that position stayed hidden for the most part because of the players that we had. And the way I would illustrate him is he's a lot like Josh Stewart. He's thicker and bigger, but same style of play, in my opinion. Can make some really nice catches, very, very competitive. And I'm looking forward to his maturity. He made some plays last year that got all of our attention as a freshman. So Josh Stewart would be the best example of kind of the type of player that he should end up or should reach at some point during his career.
Due to the injuries at the line last year, you have a lot of guys coming back this year.
don't have a lot of experience compared to the guys who graduated, but do have some experience. How has that helped them within the transition there on the line?
Oh, when you look at those guys, Hambright's been around, hasn't played in a lot of games hadn't started a lot and played, but he's been around a while. Dylan Galloway's been around. Keys has played a lot. Noel is a guy that's made really good strides in the last 12 months. Been around forever, and he's finally decided that football is important to him, and he's come along and doing well. Johnny Wilson's played a lot. Jobert hasn't played, but has a pretty good feel for our system, and obviously it was nice to get Larry back. So we have a number of guys. Tevin had some quality reps last year, and then Shane worked out with the twos, but we didn't put him in games. So the reason I think that by the 1st of October we'll be better than we've been in a number of years, because we have so many guys that have played. And you've been around here a long time. Our goal is to have 3 guards, 3 tackles, and 2 centers, and anything over that's always been a bonus. And I feel pretty good about a number of guys that we have. And our numbers are up. In offensive linemen, I think we have 24 maybe in camp, something like that, total number. And for a while there, we were around 15 or 16, a little scary. So I'm really encouraged with where we're at in our offensive line.
Jacob.
Yeah, Mike, what's it like when you lose an iconic quarterback like Mason? You've had a few practices, he's not there. I'm sure it's a little bit weird. What's it been like for you and your players to not have a guy like that around? And how do you replace a guy like that, or move forward with replacing a guy like that?
Well, it was a little bit weird in the spring when you finish and you up with the bowl and get out there, and then he's not there, and James isn't there, and Aiden's not there, and Lacey and those guys that were that core unit forever. They've adjusted now to Taylor, and so everybody's kind of accustomed to it. And it's a little different approach in that when you have as many gifted players as we had last year on the edge, you never worried about any type of pressure at all from the defense, because if you were able to just give the quarterback 1.6 or 1.5 and he could get the ball in the air, we could in most cases make a play. So that's a little different than what it's been in the past. I'm hoping that the strength we have at the running back position will offset some of that, because you have the same philosophy the other way, being that if they pressure you and you hand the ball off to a guy and he pops through there and they're in some type of man coverage, then it's going to be hard for them to catch him and get him down. But it'll be interesting to see how the second wave of receivers, which would be Wolf, who has played here, Braden Johnson, LC, those guys that I think will be just fine once they get accustomed to what we're doing in the middle of the season. They should make plays for us. But last year we had so many of them, we could just run them in all the time. And it could be a little different approach this year, meaning that we could do some of the same things with running backs.
Go ahead, Dave, in the back.
Coach, do you have a game plan yet in terms of how you'll utilize the redshirt rule?
I really don't. I was asked that question in Dallas, and my honest answer was I don't know that anybody really has a plan right now. We've had several discussions in staff meetings. There's a lot of different ways you could look at it, so I don't know that there's any wrong or right way. More so by the position, offensive linemen, chances of those guys playing maybe less than a skill position, from the fact that a lot of your skill position guys will help you on special teams, and offensive linemen are usually much further behind. So the real question will be how we handle at the quarterback position, and we won't know a lot about that for a couple weeks probably. I mentioned to our offensive staff that we really need some information around the end of third week of camp. We need to get a feel for who we think can play there behind Taylor, and then we start to come up with a plan, whether it's a freshman or a player that's already used his eligibility and it's not in that same category, even though I guess he could be. But That's really a long answer for not really. We just have to see how it goes, excluding injury. And I mentioned this the other day, if, like at the corner position last year, you know, we were down to the bare minimum. If we would have had a freshman that could help us and could have used 4 games, we would have certainly put those guys in and given them that opportunity to give us a little bit of break though with those 2 guys. 8 and 4 last year, you know, they were running crazy for 2 months.
Robert, in front.
Yeah, Mike, I asked Jim Knowles this question the other day, and it's kind of a setup question, but you have the credentials to answer this on a couple of levels as a head coach and as a OC play caller. 2 of the best years you've had defensively as head coach were Bill Young's first year and Glenn Spencer's first year. What is it that a first-year coordinator can do beyond scheme to kind of mess up the other play callers in the league?
Oh, you talking about defensively, statistically?
Yeah, I mean, those are your 2 best years, in fact.
It could be a little different now than it was then. I don't know that I have a good answer for you there. Everybody that we play, I would be willing to guess has had all of Duke's tape with what coach has done there for the number of years he's been there. And they're going to prepare their offense based on what they've seen him do at Duke. His play calling and what his thought process will be in our style of offense in this league could be different. And the analytical part of the research that's out there, the studies that are out there based on offensive and defensive coordinators in college football, there's software out there that provides tendencies for coordinators. Forget the schools. Whatever, if a coordinator had been at one school for 3 years and another school for 4 or 5 and another school for a couple, they take all that information and then they give you, it spits out what their tendencies are based in the game. So the advantage we could have is that he's not going to have tendencies at this point in this league based on being in a different conference and a little different style of play offensively.
Jason, here on the left.
You mentioned in early spring that Jelani Woods kind of was projected to be a guy to impact next year, and whatever you got this year would be kind of gravy. As he's learned the new role a little bit more at Cowboy back, has that timeline maybe shifted at all in the where you're kind of projecting him to play a role this year?
Not enough to talk about at this time. I would guess that he's more comfortable now, just from total number of plays and reps, and he's going to be given that opportunity to do some things that can help our offense based on his structure and his size and his ability to catch the ball. And if he can hold point in the blocking game, then that's a huge plus for us. With his body size and his length, in most cases he's going to be in a one-on-one with a 235 or 240, maybe 250-pound end. So we hope he comes on, and the more he does, we'll give him more. But at this point in camp, it'd be hard for me to say that he's much different than the end.
Mike, there are 7 first-year coaches in FBS who are first-time head coaches. 6 of them were offensive coordinators. So, considering that Yursich has gotten good results with all sorts of quarterback circumstances, he's here now 6 years. Are you just kind of holding your breath each year at this point that you know, when you keep him from year to year, you feel like it's a bonus? You expect that he's going to just become a more desired commodity with each year?
I do. You know, he's had offers. He could be a head coach now if he wanted to. I think he's looking for a specific opportunity like they all have. The guys that were here before that, they all had opportunities and stayed until a certain job, except with the exception of Dana. He had started at a much higher level. But you know, Mike has been tremendous for us, and he's going to be a head coach. It's just a matter of time. It's certainly better for us if he's here, but I also want him to get the job that he wants. And he's worked extremely hard and been very loyal to Oklahoma State football. And so it'll be an exciting time for him and his family. He's got young kids when he gets started. But, I guess maybe you're asking how much longer can we keep him here. I don't know that anybody knows that, but he's very capable of being a head coach at this time, in my opinion.
So, because it seems like with him, it's gone from being a possibility at some point to a likelihood at some point for him. I mean, so do you start to kind of check around, you know what I mean? To look around just to be aware of maybe other people who you might look at in the event that you need a guy in December?
I mentioned at some point, and maybe in Dallas or somewhere else, I don't know where I was, but I think that we're far enough along here now with my experience in the years that we've had coaches come through here and leave, or coaches that are currently on our staff, that I would be shocked. Well, I should be shocked. Anything I do wouldn't shock me, but I would be surprised if I were to hire a coordinator from this point on, and maybe even an assistant coach that has not played here, coached here, or worked at some time over the last 14 years, because we have enough people out there. So I'm in a much better place than I was, and I think that we certainly have quality people on our staff now that I wouldn't hesitate just moving them right into the coordinator role.
Nathan down here.
What do you like about Drew Brown, and what kind of value do you think he can provide in any role?
Yeah, it's so early for me. I wasn't even here the first practice, so I've seen him twice, and I was watching some other stuff, but I have paid some attention to him, and then I like that he's competitive. He's essentially a gym rat shortstop is what he is. He's learned the offense on his own, came and watched and took notes and put it all together. And has worked hard to get to where he's at. I like that. That means it's important to him. But I just don't have a way of giving you a barometer on where he's at right now, just based on only seeing him for 2 days. I will say that I'm surprised that he and Spencer both can function as well as they did in practice with handling our offense and being as young as they are and or as new with Drew, even though he's played 25 games at this level, not in our terminology. So there's some similarities, but he's speaking a different language. So I'm impressed with him and Spencer that they're able to function out there in practice with our offense at such an early stage.
You mentioned that different language. You've got a guy in Taylor, obviously, who has a lot of experience in the system. So just generally speaking, what do you think is kind of more valuable for a quarterback, actual in-game playing experience or just experience in a system?
It was interesting. I was driving and listening the other day on the radio, and I might get off statistically a little bit, but I think you guys will get the point. The top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL average yards per game throwing last year were all over 36 years old, except for the guy from Philadelphia. So what that tells you is how important experience is. So you have I'm sure Brady's one of them, and he's like 40 or something, and I don't know how old Ben is, but he was one of them. And then the other 4, I don't remember the names. There's one guy, and it was Wentz, I think is his name. All the rest of them were over 36 years old. And so I was thinking that proves how important experience is at the quarterback position. And Taylor's got a lot of experience. I've said this, I'll say it again. I don't have any doubt that he could be a really good college quarterback. We just don't know what he's going to do in front of the crowd because he's never done it. That's the only thing we don't know about him. We've watched him function in our practice. He understands our offense. He can run. He can throw. He's intelligent. He's tough. He's just never played in a crowd to start the games. I mean, he's come in, but it's a little easier to come in and be a relief pitcher if I'm up 8 runs than it is to come in if it's a tie game and there's 2 people on and only 1 out. So I'm very confident in his ability, and his experience has played a key role in me feeling that way at this time.
Karen here to the right.
Like in '88, Barry was a guy that obviously didn't say a whole lot or didn't really need. It wasn't his way, it wasn't his personality, and yet I take it teammates gravitated toward him because of how he carried himself and how he went about his business. Now you've got a kid in Justice who don't know if he's as soft-spoken as Barry, but that's just not his way to be a loud, rah-rah guy. And yet I get the sense that the kids around him gravitate toward justice, like perhaps they once did Barry. Do you see a similarity in that sense?
They're very similar. I very seldom hear Justice talk. Obviously, I heard Barry talk more because I was around him and in the huddle. I don't know that our coaches ever really heard him say much, but their personalities, they're very humble. They're very appreciative of what they've accomplished. They love being here, and they're very similar. I saw something the other day. You guys probably saw it. I mean, there's so many people now that put out somebody put out all-time great running backs. And once you get into the top 10 of them, I don't know how you tell who's better than any other one. I think they had him in 3rd or 4th. So I actually thought about putting something out on Twitter, and I thought, that's not good. I'm probably not going to do that. Because I think he's clearly the best running back ever, in my opinion. I say this, I've said it before and I'll say it again. If he was running behind the Dallas Cowboys offensive line during those years, he'd have 30,000 yards.
Is Justice's presence a follow-up? Is that more important this year because of some of the players that you...
Is what?
Is his presence more important this year
Yeah.
because of...
As I mentioned earlier, the one advantage that Taylor and that gang has is they have 2 mature running backs, and Hill is a fantastic player. We all know. People say, will it be a first-round pick? I don't know. Sometimes they don't draft running backs in the first round. I'd be shocked if he's not a top 3 running back pick, whatever round that is. And then his confidence that he brings, and the fact that we handed the ball off to him in the bowl game last year on 3rd and 14 against Virginia Tech in that last drive. I think it was maybe 3rd and 12, something like that. Because he has shown the ability to make the first person miss and be really good at running the ball. And so that certainly helps where we're at. And his presence is very important. His toughness and leadership and all those different things. And I mean, he comes from his mom and daddy are great people, did a great job with him, and he hasn't allowed himself to be entitled, which happens to humans all the time. And he's the same personality he was when he showed up. And that's what's made him a fantastic player. And he's going to be like James and Mason and those guys. He's a gold mine for the NFL because these guys are going to do his job. You're never going to hear about him. So, couldn't be any more proud of him.
Jenny down front.
On the other side of the ball, Edison Magruder, and it seems like with all the changes that Jim's brought in, there's a guy that had to maybe change his body the most, change his duties the most, might be Kenneth. What kind of sacrifice has he made, and what does that mean to your defense to have him do what he's done?
And you're right in what you're saying. Kenneth has made changes, and if I were to say, if somebody were to say you had to pick one player on the defense that this adjustment would fit best, it would be him. He went through a period of time last year, Magruder, where he was in a position that it was hard for him to play based on his ability, his strengths, and he's now in a role that should really fit his style of play and what his strengths and what he brings to the table. And it just proves, when I watch him, it proves how powerful the mental approach to the game is, and that he feels good about his role. And as I just sit back and watch it from a distance, he's, in my opinion, a completely different person now than he was, just because he thinks and feels like, hey, I fit this. This is perfect for me. And he's done really well. His attitude's been great. And so when I say I'm excited about watching the defense play just because I want to see what they're going to do, he's one of the guys I'm excited about watching because his role has changed and it really fits his style of play.
If you're in the middle.
Coach, what does it mean 30 years later that so many of the national records that Barry set still stand today?
And again, and the guy came out of the game all the time in the third quarter. So But the game has changed a little bit to his advantage from a standpoint. There's more passes, but there are also more plays too. And you don't see guys carry the ball as much as he did. The durability is not like it used to be. No different than in the big leagues. They don't let pitchers throw past 5 innings anymore. So the games are changing, but I've said it a bunch and I'll say it again. I just, there's a lot of great players out there, but I don't know anybody that I would pick before him. And no disrespect to Detroit or anybody else, but I still say that if he was behind a different group at that particular time, that his records would be so far out of reach, it'd be hard for anybody to ever get to him.
Down here, Mike.
Yeah, you mentioned you've got a lot of offensive linemen, more than you've had in the past in camp. And I realize these guys may not factor, but when you look at the future and you see a guy like Hunter Anthony and Jacob Farrell, I looked at those two guys today, those two young tackles that are freshmen, and they don't look like freshmen. Cooper Castleberry, the referee that was here to speak to the Extreme Campers, looked at Johnny Barr and said, "Those are freshmen?" I mean, that kind of tells you what you're getting on the ground floor with some of these guys that Josh is bringing in.
Well, it's nice that we're having this conversation because we went 4 or 5 years and we were working in the other direction. We were talking about just trying to manage it with 5 or 6 guys and didn't have a lot of depth and hoping we could stay healthy. And fortunately, we managed it well enough that we were still successful. But I really feel good about the young people in this program in all the positions. I think we're recruiting better than we ever have, in my opinion. And Josh is doing a fantastic job. Josh is at a place that he loves. He and his wife both graduated from here, and it's easier to work in an environment when you actually care about the product that's coming out of the environment because of the people around you. And I think you're seeing that with Josh, and and really in our recruiting, we're getting some making some real headway. I give Joe Bob and Richmond a hard time on who's actually responsible for signing good players, but they're working together and doing really well. And Greg's got a lot of long history here. So Josh has done a good job. We have some quality bodies to work with. You guys are 300 pounds showing up. And by the time that Rob Glass works on him for 24 months, he's going to trim him down a little bit, get him stronger, and work on foot speed. And so that process is enjoyable to watch instead of trying to reach and grab guys and hope that they can make enough plays to survive during the season, which we did for about 4 years.
Jake?
Yeah, Mike, you and Yursich have been adamant that Taylor is the guy going into the preseason. Is there anything that the other two guys, Sanders, Drew Brown, or whoever, anything that they can do in August to unseat Taylor, or is it going to be a case where Taylor has to, play poorly enough in the fall where those guys might get a chance? Is that?
It's really difficult from a standpoint of, for us, I don't know that everybody else is this way, but you all know we have a certain number of reps that we give. The ones can only go on the field so many times. And so if we think that Taylor's our guy coming out of spring, which we did, even though he hasn't played in front of a crowd and proven anything to us, for the most part, if you reflect back on Mason after playing those 2 or 3 games his freshman year, you couldn't just bet the house that he was still going to be a good player because he really didn't have that much experience. But we had to say, okay, you're our guy. Okay, we're going to push all our money over there with you, and we're getting behind you. And because of the way that reps are distributed in practice, that's why Taylor's our guy, because he's proven to us that he understands and that we can win with him and be successful. So when you have for Woodty and you have Drew and you have Spencer come in, their reps at this time are limited. So could it happen? Sure. You could have a guy come in and just take over, and then you would have to start trying to find a way to make it work for 2 people. That's not something we would want to do unless it was a goal line short guarding situation. But if somebody earned that right, you would certainly have to facilitate it. It could happen, but it's not likely to happen early in the season until we give the other guy his opportunity, and he's earned his stripe from being here to go out and play, and we'll see where he's at. Now, you know, the circumstances with Spencer are obviously different than with Drew, you know, and then Woodtie's a guy that understands everything, and we're hoping he'll improve and get better and better and better.
One thing, you know, you see grad transfer quarterbacks all over the place. A lot of them leave because they're not even playing time. It's different with Drew. He's played 2 years. Does that give him any advantage that might be different from a guy who hasn't played at his previous
Sure.
school?
Yeah.
And is that you know, something you guys, you know,
Sure.
are excited about?
Sure, he's played in games. He's, you know, threw for 2,500 yards and played 25 games, and so he has experience. And you can tell in practice, the little bit that I've seen of him, he has more awareness than a younger player might have just because he's been out there. And the speed of the game is a very drastic change for a high school player at this level. He's already been involved in the speed of the game. So he's further ahead just based on what you said. He's been out there in the lights. He's played in 25 games. So again, if somebody said you had to make a decision on whether you thought if he got in the game, could he function, you would lean toward yes, because he's already been out there.
Jason on the left.
Last year, you on special teams took its lumps across the board. You bring in an analyst this offseason. Have you tried to emphasize that a little bit more in practice, try to take more advantage of those hidden yards?
We haven't changed a lot. We've increased some meeting time. You know, we had some discussions over what might have been the reasons that we weren't as good as we thought, and we've come up with solutions and kind of put a plan in place. But it wouldn't be a big difference from what we've done in the past. I just think we need to do it a little bit better.